Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Glasgow Motorway Archive podcast. I'm Stuart Baird.
And I'm John Hassel.
You're joining us for part 2 in our special series of podcasts looking at the history of the A9, one of Scotland's most important truck roads. You'll remember from part 1 that we discussed the section between Stirling and Perth in detail, and we gave you a broad overview of the history of the entire route from Edinburgh all the way up to Thurso. So, on this episode, we're joined again by Duncan Macknight, our resident expert on the A9 and Glasgow Motorway Archive member. Welcome again, Duncan.
That's me. How are we doing?
It's good to see you again. And John, likewise, good to see you again.
Yeah, you as well.
All good. Now, we're not going to hang about in this because there's a vast amount of information to get through
So
for part 2.
1 hour, 1 hour is not long enough, let me tell you.
Now, for the benefit of the listeners, for part 2, we're going to discuss the 1970s and 80s upgrade of the section of the road between Perth and Inverness. We're then going to talk about the dualling of that section, which is very much on the agenda at the moment.
Yes.
And we're then going to get a wee bit of an overview of the section between Inverness and Thurso, particularly looking at like Kessick Bridge, Dornock and Chromatic, because these are very important sections. And we might even throw in a wee mention of the Berrydale Braes upgrade that opened just
I was going to say,
fantastic.
I've not driven it yet, but I'm sure you've been on it, Duncan.
Oh, it's good fun.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So last time then we finished with a wee discussion about Broxton Roundabout and what we think we should do there to improve that.
Yes.
So we're going to move north from there then. Now, Broxton Roundabout, we mentioned, was constructed as part of the Perth Western Bypass.
As part of the M90
Right.
put in there. And then we had the A9 to Stirling being dualled. And then we've got the new section that goes from Broxton to Inverarmond, and that was called the Perth Western Bypass Scheme.
Okay.
This was opened on the 17th of September 1985 on a design by Tayside Regional Council, and it was built by Morrison's Construction.
Well, that's quite recent.
Morrison's Construction.
Yeah.
They're the same people that built the M9 Spur.
Yeah, indeed. That's quite late, 1985. I thought that would have been done before that, actually.
Yeah, it did take a little while. I think the farmer with the road passes was not too happy with it.
Oh,
right. Okay.
So
He wanted
we got him out of the way.
And,
There's one little bit of trivia that I found when researching this is that the junction in the middle of the Perth bypass where it goes over the A85.
Yeah, what's that junction called?
It's the A85 junction.
A85
It's something like that.
How catchy.
The thing I found about it is that the slip roads connecting to the A9 were not built as part of the A9. They were added in later due to lower traffic or less of a traffic demand. So they were opened in April 1987.
Right, so that was only a couple of years after.
Yeah,
So
they quickly put these things in. Yeah,
Right.
They had the bridge there with the intention of having the slip roads.
I assume so. Yeah.
Right, okay.
If you go past that area now, there is a lot of. They have been moving stuff around for the Perth Futures, Perth Bypass,
Perth
the
Transport Futures.
Perth Transport Futures. Yeah.
And a new junction was put in there recently for that, is that right?
They've stuck a big bit onto the junction. They've closed a couple of the slip roads and they've added another sort of section of road going up to where their big scheme will be.
And
so
this
this is the easy bit.
It's kind of it's almost a northern bypass of Perth, isn't it?
Pretty much,
this road, yeah.
Because Perth is now starting to grow north now.
Yeah,
So.
and that's all funded by City Deal. Now, we're not going to go into that in any detail. That might be something we discuss when we do our next visit to the City Deal projects that are happening across Scotland. So anyway, back to the A9 there then. That section, was it dualled at that point? Was it always dual carriageway?
It was dualled at that point, yeah.
Okay.
Built as dual carriageway.
And I take it prior to the construction of that bypass, the original A9 basically went straight through Perth?
Straight through Perth, yeah. You can still follow it to this day. And the A93 coming off Broxton is the original line of it.
Okay.
And then you get sort of lost in the tangle of streets at Perth.
Okay.
Right,
So,
okay.
yeah, you sort of went in and then went up through Perth.
Right. Now, you hit a roundabout at Inverarmond.
At Inverarmond, yeah.
Don't you? Now, was that the end of that section?
That was
you were
pretty much
talking about?
that was the top of the Perth bypass.
Okay.
Yeah. So there was a wee stub built when Inverarmond was built.
Yeah.
Now, Inverarmond to Ardully, or Perth to Ardully, was taken up as a sort of a major project upgrade. It was I'll get my notes up here, so I'm not going.
This is the first section of dual carriageway
This
north
was-
of Inverarmond.
Yeah.
And then it goes to single carriageway around about kind of Lunkity,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
The history of this bit can be taken up with the whole sort of Perth Inverness rebuild, which happened between 1972 and 1986, which is
Now,
Perth to Stirling, Perth to Inverness.
Tell me about that. Why did that come about? How did it come about?
Well, the road from Perth to Inverness, as you heard from the last podcast, was last done in 1925. And it was single carriageway. It was good. It did its job. But as people started to go north and tourism started to increase,
Yeah.
the oil boom happened, and there was the accident rate on the old road started to go up, and there was a need for something better, something more reliable, something faster, because they could be affected by accidents, could be affected by weather, particularly snow. It could be once you got into a traffic train, as I like to call it, stuck behind something. You were pretty much stuck behind it because there was no dual carriageway.
Yeah.
You went through all the towns and villages. You went up and over all these narrow bridges. It was not the fastest way north. It was a good road, but it wasn't fast.
Yeah,
and
so
that's what we needed.
A journey from Perth to Inverness was probably
It was
pretty long-winded.
It
and-
went through a lot of towns. I'd
Yeah,
imagine.
3.5 hours. My father remembers it, and he says it was round about 3.5 hours.
God, okay.
Oft
And
to do
what would it be in today's standards?
Today it would be just under 2 hours
Right,
to do
okay.
Perth to Inverness
And
on
when
a
the
good
dual
day.
carriageway comes along, probably come down to about an hour and a half, maybe?
It will go down to about an hour 40 minutes. So,
Right,
so
okay.
you will save 20 minutes of driving.
Yeah, so, okay.
It's not bad.
So,
So,
yeah, so
Less
it's quite an
stressful.
Yeah.
improvement then.
Yeah.
Yeah, now, this project
Yes.
what is often referred to as the Highland Highway.
The Highland
isn't it?
Highway. Yes.
And it's almost it's Perth to Inverness's equivalent of the motorway era in the Central Belt.
Yeah.
So when we were looking at new routes for the M8 and the M74 and the M73 and all these routes, improvements to the A9 were also being looked at. And this whole section of A9, basically from Perth to Inverness, was a new road built on a new alignment, bypassing countless towns and cost a lot of money.
A little over £200 million back in 1986.
Yeah,
in
and
total.
A lot of money.
A lot of
back
money
then.
for
Yeah.
something like this.
It's-
I mean,
it's-
now it would be the whole budget of the government to do something like this.
Yeah. Now, 200 million was the cost envisaged in the highway plan for Glasgow in 1965 of what it would cost to build the entire scheme there. So, that is a lot of money. It is a lot of money. Okay. Right.
Shall I give you a bit of background as to the standard set for this road?
Yeah,
And
sure,
what
yeah.
Okay, so in 1972, the Scottish Development Department who said, okay, let's get this road rebuilt, along with the building of the bridges at Kessick and Chromatic.
Yeah.
They all said, okay, let's get this rebuilt. So they set up the A9 project team in 1972.
Okay.
And these were a collection of guys to coordinate everything, to make sure to rebuild the existing road, to cause as little disruption to the existing road as possible, and to get it done as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So it's a sort of modern day equivalent, kind of the A74M.
Yeah.
How quickly that was done.
So, this project team then, who was involved in that? Was it local authorities or was it, was it
It
Scottish,
was
Scottish
several-
office officials?
It
or-
was several consulting engineers and a couple of sort of agent authorities for Scottish Development Department who
Yeah.
brought forward to say, look, let's get this thing done
Okay.
as quickly as possible. The standards that were set for the technically minded people was, for this new road, you must build it as a 60 mile an hour full sight overtaking distance.
Yeah.
It's got to have 450 metre sight distance.
Yeah.
Laybys every 1 kilometre where possible.
Yeah.
A culvert's minimum of 900 millimetre in diameter, that's the pipes that go under the road.
Yeah.
A minimum frost-free depth of 450 millimetres, that's basically how thick the pavement is.
Yeah.
And maximum gradients of around about 4%.
So
So this is for this single carriageway.
This
that
is
they
a
do.
very high standard section of road, almost motorway standards, but for a single carriageway road
Yes.
being built.
Now, I imagine a lot of people are screaming, well, why didn't they dual the blooming thing? Because it's taking ages to dual it. Well,
Yes, I was going to ask that.
at the time, the traffic figures did not warrant this thing
Right.
being dualed. Now, that caused a bit of controversy. Because we
So
were
at
saying,
the time,
well, we were
peop-
getting a narrow single carriage and we're getting a wide single carriage. Why don't we get a dual carriage?
Yeah.
Aberdeen are getting a dual carriage. We've got a
Yeah.
motorway down south. Why do we get a... and it was just, there was not enough traffic on the road
One
to
thing-
justify that.
Yeah, one thing about it that's always stood out to me is I think that they were short-sighted in that they didn't allow for future dualling of the route. So they've said, okay, it doesn't warrant it now, but I think they should have shown a bit of foresight and said, but the earthworks that we're going to do are going to enable the addition of a
Yeah.
carriageway down the line.
They did say to them, make sure that you make allowance for adding in a second carriageway later. So all these big bends and curves and things, they're all sort of dual carriageway standard.
Right, okay.
So they're done with a very, very high standard.
Right, I see. So mostly it is like that, but
It is.
But then I'm gonna really jump the gun here, guys. But then I'm thinking with this current dueling project that look at the A9, then surely that should be very cheap and easy. But it doesn't
it's
seem
not,
to be.
no.
But it's not.
Yeah.
So
The alignment is there. The structures are not. That's the thing.
But yes, I was gonna, and also the standards are probably a lot different now.
Because if you look at the A96, they're having to rebuild all of that.
yeah, it's offline
Because-
expressway. Yeah.
So why we're probably thinking, why are the dual carriageway sections where they are?
Okay.
Because they're not random. Nowhere are they random, because this is all done with precision.
How many dual carriage? I'm thinking of the original road.
The original road.
How many sections of dual carriage were there?
About 8,
Eight.
7 or
Right.
8.
Well,
Yeah.
why
Fair, of varying lengths.
Yeah. So why don't we work northwards then? Take us northwards from
Yeah.
Inverarmond, and let's talk about a minute. And as we get to each of these main dual carriageways that were part
Yeah.
of the original section,
Yeah.
tell us why they were
Yeah.
built as dual carriageway.
Okay.
Oh, there's another little thing that I would like to throw in there.
All
if
right.
that's all
Go
right.
for it.
If anyone's noticed the curbs on the side of the A9, they were also unique.
Okay.
The curves with wee bumps on them.
All right.
Have you
yeah.
all seen them?
Yes.
They're the TRRL, the Transport Road Research Laboratory,
Yep.
reflector curbs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, these were thought up in 1967 to say,
Right.
well, why don't we do this curb and it reflects traffic
So what have they got?
headlights.
Have they got like little reflectors on them, like strips, like what you see on signs?
No.
Okay.
All they've got is two little sections that sit on the curb and they
Yeah.
cast a shadow. Now, this didn't really work.
If you
But
want
they
to
are
see
quite
them,
unique.
for anybody who's maybe in the Glasgow area who maybe would like to see what they look like, if you drive a section of the A725 Bellshill Bypass, you'll see a similar concept there.
Yeah.
And on the A73 south of Lanark, heading out towards Biggar, and the M74 if you're heading south, I believe they were also used out there, and you can see them in that part of the world as well.
See, I'm not a curb expert, but I know the things you guys
Yeah.
are talking about.
The
And I always thought they were
Kelty Bypass has got them as well on the M90.
Yeah, I thought they were for originally. I thought they were for they were a rumble feature, a safety feature, or something. But no,
They're also sort of there to deter people sitting on the grass and going
yeah.
onto the verges and things like that.
Well, we need a whole podcast on curbs, don't we,
I know.
guys?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
It was the project was taken forward very quickly.
Yeah.
Nobody really objected to it, but there was a worry of having this big road bypassing places. Would all the villages die out?
Okay.
Right.
So the Scottish Development Department compromised by saying you can build this new road, but under no circumstances are you to build any roadside services to protect the services in the
My.
bypass villages.
Goodness.
So that's why it's so.
There's your problem.
Yeah.
That's
Stuart.
why it's a nightmare to get a pee between Perth and Inverness.
Just don't drink.
No.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. So that's a feature there.
Okay.
So shall we begin at Broxton Roundabout? No, Broxton Roundabout. Inverarmond Roundabout
Yes.
and
Go
go
north.
north.
Take
Because
us
there's a lot
north
to
from
talk about.
Inverarmond.
So the Inverarmond Roundabout, this was a scheme called the Almond Bridge Diversion.
Okay.
Now, if you look at if you're heading north from Inverarmond, you go over the River Almond. This is a large 3-span structure. This was, let me shuffle my notes here, this was designed by Babty Morton, and it was built by Miller Construction and cost $4 million. And it was the first section of the new A9 to open. It was basically about 2 miles of dual carriageway going north from this roundabout.
And was this an online upgrade?
This was, the bridge was offline, but the rest of it was all online.
Okay.
So you can see bits and pieces. I was speaking to an engineer recently called Donald Lamont, who was with Babty's. He says that it was originally envisaged as a sort of a dual carriageway approach to Perth, to
Okay.
have this roundabout here and then have a bypass.
Yeah.
And then I assume it was absorbed later on into the A9 upgrade.
Right.
But there was a wee bit of work done at this section to determine the location of a Roman fort that is existing on the side of the railway, something
Okay.
like that, because they weren't sure where it was, so they did a bit of research and found that's where it was. So I think it's on the OS maps.
Right.
Okay.
And this section, which was the first section, it began construction on the 19th of November 1973, and it opened on the 26th of June 1975.
Okay.
It's not too bad. So you've got this good, high-quality dual carriageway approach. It seems like it's got a grade-separated junction on it.
Yeah.
That's the Longitude Bypass you're looking at there.
Yeah.
That was the next section.
Ah, right.
So the next
okay.
section going north ran from there's a little sort of house, Denmark field, Broxy Kennels. If you look in the OS maps, you'll be able to see it just before the straight section.
Okay.
And it went to where they're currently building that big new junction for the A9 dueling. That was the Lunkity Bypass.
Right, okay.
This was, again, designed by Babty Morton and built by Miller, so it was the same two guys who did it.
Okay.
And it opened on the 7th of December 1977.
Okay, so another couple of years later,
Yeah.
next section comes along. Okay.
We've got a wee extract from an opening booklet I'd like to read out, if that's
Okay,
all right.
Yeah.
Go for it.
This is about the Lunkity Bypass. It will connect the recently completed Almond Bridge scheme with the Lunkity to Burnham section, construction of which began in February 1976. Dual carriageway ends some 1.5 kilometres from the south end to beyond a junction designed to serve Lunkity and Stanley, and that's the grade separated one.
Right.
North, which the road continues as a single carriageway for the further 2.5 kilometres at the moment. The route bypasses the village of Lunkity on the west side of the main Perth Inverness railway line and eliminates a hazardous bend under the railway viaduct.
Ah. Okay.
So that was that. Shout out also to Ronnie Land, who designed this section of the bypass and was involved in the Duncan Bypass. So I'm finding all these Babty people who remember all this, so it's good that they're
Yes,
sharing the information.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the section going north from there was Lunkity to Burnham, and this was designed by Tayside Regional Council and built by R.J. MacLeod.
Oh,
And this
okay.
opened in May of 1976, and this is the bypass of Bankfoot, basically.
Okay. So we had the section then opened in 75. The one you just discussed was 77, and then this one was 76.
Yeah.
So a lot of construction
A
happening.
lot of things going on, yeah.
Right, around
to
about the
get it
same
done.
sort of time. Okay.
I just to chip in here,
Yeah.
there's a section here. This is single carriageway, but they have actually in some sections here in recent years, and maybe in the last kind of 15 years, they have actually hatched off and put islands in the central res.
Yes, the Bankfoot Junction.
Yes, and this was
Originally,
that wasn't there.
Originally, that wasn't there. You had to turn right heading south to get into Bankfoot. Now, this became notorious not for accidents, but the fact that it would take ages to turn right.
It's very,
And it'd probably
very
be
busy
better
there.
to go to Perth, turn around and come back up because
Wow.
of the queues, because that is one of the busier sections of the A9. So this was grade separated in 2009.
Ah,
And they added in a slip at the north side.
Right.
It's like a Lilo type junction.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. That they've
Okay.
got there.
Interesting.
Fun fact for railway enthusiasts.
Okay.
There's a small section here at the Bankfoot end that is on the line of the old Bankfoot Railway.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
There was a small spur came off the main line and went to Bankfoot and stopped. And that was pulled up, I think, in about 64. And then they constructed the A9 along it. So it made this nice convenient corridor. And that extends up to the Burnham Junction.
Okay.
So the next section is the Burnham Bypass. So we're back to Baptishaw and Morton. And this was built by J.G. McGregor. And it opened on the 30th of June 1977. So this is the famous bit that goes past the railway station.
Yeah,
And it's very, very constrained. So we've got a wee extract here. Proximity to the existing railway embankments raised considerable problems, and both the road and railway embankments are being instrumented to monitor settlement and other movements. Only one major bridge is required, and one of the 300,000 cubic metres of excavation. All will be used to construct the new embankments. So that
Okay.
section is all raised across the village of Burnham. So if you live in Burnham, I'm very sorry.
How are they going to squeeze the jeweled section through? It's very tight, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's not a lot of
I
space.
seen something. What they were going to do was the car park with the railway. They were going to cut and cover tunnel the car park
Right,
from the railway and do it that way. I've seen various people, but I know there's lots of options on the table at that
Yeah.
section.
Speaking to some of the engineers, there is enough space to squeeze it in, but they need to have certain requirements and things like that, and the car park will have to be moved.
Yeah.
So they thought, well, let's have another option of keep the car park and burrow underneath
Yeah,
with an underpass like the one in Stirling.
yeah.
Right.
So that's
that's
on
what-
the table. This is fairly problematic because of how close Burnham is and how
Yeah.
and the railway station, I think, is a grade 1 listed building, so they can't touch that
Yeah.
at all.
So the existing dueling work that's under construction at the moment,
Yes,
as
Lunkity
of September 2020.
Lunkity to Burnham.
So that ends just prior to this
That ends
section.
just
then?
that clicks onto the small section that goes round the bend.
I was
Okay.
just about to ask about that small section of dual carriage. I always remember it goes slightly uphill and on a bend.
Yes,
Yeah.
that is one of the two reasons as to why bits were duelled.
Okay.
Is because the single carriageways for curves, they needed to have 450 metres of sight distance for you to travel at 60 safely and overtake stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Where that could not be achieved, they duelled it.
See, and that
This is kind
I
of
remember hearing that in the film about the A9.
Yes.
Yeah.
some engineers who were involved in Glasgow felt that was over the top for the A9,
Yeah,
providing all those overtaking opportunities, even on curves.
yeah,
Because they felt that, hang on a minute, you don't want to be encouraging overtaking on curves anyway.
It's
So
no.
you save it for
Long-
the straights.
Sweeping, deceptive bends.
Yeah.
Very deceptive. Some of them are quite good. Some of them are a bit just not good enough for
Yeah.
overtaking. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
as drivers, we don't want to overtake on bends.
No,
we
I
want to
know-
overtake on
no-
straight bits.
Yeah, I know it was open to criticism at the time.
Yeah.
I'd
It's like a motorway line. I've always
Yeah.
found the road as a motorway line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
You
It
know,
does, basically.
It
yeah.
is. And especially if you're going down, you're trying to overtake on a bend that's going left. You know,
Yeah, that was one of the reasons that this
tricky.
flowing alignment theory
Yeah.
that the road is built with was sort of phased out
Yeah.
to the more straighter roads that we have
Yeah,
today.
because flowing alignment is very much a motorway principle, motorway design principle, you know, but,
It
but
does
it's easy
fit-
to achieve when
it
you have...
fits with the landscape quite well.
Yeah, yeah,
Because this road is going through very, very delicate landscapes.
Yeah.
It fits very, very nicely, but it's not the best for overtaking. Maintaining speed, great.
not for
Passing
overtaking.
stuff, struggles a bit.
Okay, what came after that?
So after Burnham, we've got a fairly major scheme called Dunkeld Bypass.
Yep.
Okay.
This was designed by Baptist Sean Morton and it was built by Tarmac, with major earthworks being done by tractor shovels.
Okay,
The reason for these major earthworks was the famous diversion of the River Tay that took place.
Yeah.
Have you seen this?
I've
Have you
seen,
heard
I've
about
seen this in the film.
Yes,
Actually,
this is in the
they
river.
do.
There's
So
a-
they changed the course of the river.
They changed the course of the river. Actually, no, they didn't. They put it onto an alignment it originally had.
Oh,
But
right,
um,
okay. Well,
yeah,
that's
but it had
not
been
so bad.
moved, so they put it back to this alignment and fitted this sort of bendy section of the road in. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
so it's
clever.
just that. Yeah, so I've got a small extract from a Baptist Sean Morton report of the Dunkeld Bypass.
okay.
So this 9-kilometre single 7.3 metre wide carriageway, Dunkeld Bypass, was designed following an examination of a variety of routes north of Dunkeld, and the route finally chosen was the one the one that not only met the design criteria but was best fitted into the landscape. The Countryside Commission for Scotland and other interests were consulted along with the road line, and their views were considered by the Scottish Development Department together with the engineering and economic factors. So there was a lot of study going on to get this bit fitted in. To carve the new road into the rugged slopes of the river valley involved the excavation of approximately 1 million cubic metres of soft material, which is sands and gravel, 100,000 cubic metres of unusable material, and 50,000 cubic metres of rock. Most of the rock removed lay close to the Inver railway tunnel, and blasting was therefore considerably restricted. The
Slow
two-
work.
Yeah. The 225 metre long Tay Bridge crosses the river in 3 spans and incorporates twin 3.5 metre deep steel plate girders. The structure was assembled on the north side, and the first stage launch took place in September of 1976. In mid-July 1975, a short length of the River Tay north of Dunkeld was diverted from its normal course onto a new man-made channel. The diversion of the river by up to 200 metres over a length of 700 metres involved the movement of some 100,000 cubic metres of material together with a sheet-piled groin, bank stabilisation works and rock-filled protection to the toe of the new embankment. So there was a lot of earthworks, and
That's-
lots of moving of muck and things, and
Yeah,
dumper trucks and diggers, and it was all
Now
very
that's
exciting.
real civil
Yeah.
engineering.
If you
right?
watch, there is a video of the A9 rebuild. If you Google A9 Highland Highway, there's a section in that focuses on the river diversion and the
Is that on
construction
the
of the
Scottish
Tay.
Screen Archive?
Scottish Screen Archive. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
a fantastic thing. It's one of the best things on there,
Okay.
honestly.
Oh, brilliant.
So yeah, so I
great.
have to give first of all a shout out to Robin Brown, a former employee of Baptist Sean Morton, who lent me his archive to go through all this stuff. So thank you so much for lending me the archive. I will get it back to you momentarily.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Robin,
So,
for that.
so that sounds an impressive civil engineering section. But where do we go north from this?
We
then?
go north and we have the Ballinluig Bypass, or it was Guy to Tynrich. Giving these obscure
Okay.
names.
These
So-
obscure names
Yeah.
that people wouldn't know. So
Where that straight section is, where the road and the railway run next to each other, up to the
Right.
top of Ballinluig, that was basically that section. This opened in April of 1983, and it was designed by Tayside Regional Council and built by R.J. MacLeod, and this includes the 5-span bridge over the A9, the railway line, and I think there's a watercourse in there, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I know that section.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a fact here. The concrete pour for the bridge deck was Britain's largest outside of the oil industry at 1,300 cubic metres, which was a new record over 2 days and 2 nights. Thanks to Clive Bridges at Ballinluig Services for giving me that information. So thank you for the hint.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. You're just looking at that, John, the slip roads.
I am at that junction because we're at the section where this is a place where I often stop, which is at Ballinewig.
It's good, yes.
And this scheme that you're talking about here, does this include the whole dual carriageway?
This includes the dual carriageway. Yeah.
This is a very long straight section of dual carriageway that goes up past you. Now this junction here wasn't always here.
No.
It was a crossing, wasn't it?
It was a crossing.
Right,
if you look on Google now, you have a roundabout and 2 slip roads for the northbound road. They were not originally there.
Mm-hmm.
So what you had, roughly where the bus stop is, you had a right turn to get into Ballinewig. Now, people flying down this dual carriageway posed some difficulty in turning across the road, so it was grade separated in about 2007, 2008, I think,
something like that.
By squeezing in these 2 slip roads. These are very impressive. They go over the railway and do a 180 to get back. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I remember there was a speed camera in there.
There was a speed camera. My father got caught by that speed camera.
Oh, bad Mr. McKnight. So that speed camera, and it was 50 mile an hour, and I remember this. I do remember because I drove that road before that was upgraded, but it certainly makes things a lot easier and a lot safer getting in and out of the services. So Ballinewig is one of that's kind of like a truck stop in there, and I know that as like probably the best services on the A9.
It's fantastic.
And a good section for overtaking if you've been stuck behind something.
Absolutely. Pit Lock. I always call it the Pit Lockry straight. You know, and
it is. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why this was dualled because it is a straight. It's not on a gradient.
Yeah.
It's not on a bend.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's probably something to do with the approach to Pit Lockry and maybe joining traffic at the top of the dual carriage or something like that.
Yeah. What's the road that comes in at that junction there?
That's the 924, I think.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So that's that one. So the next section north of Ballinewig is the Bypass of Pit Lockry.
Yeah.
Right.
Now this was a difficult section, not for engineering, but for environmental reasons, because Pit Lockry is a sort of gem in the Highlands. It is a beautiful nature area, and fitting this big new fast single carriageway into it was going to pose some difficulties.
Right.
So that's the long section that goes around there.
So this is the section from the dual carriageway heading north.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
There was an engineering in here. This required the building of the Tummel and the Clooney bridges.
Right.
To cross the water there.
Yeah, because the A9's actually quite far south and west away from Pit Lockry because it had to go on the other side of the river, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we've got there was an engineering paper written about this, about the planning, design, and construction of a road in an area of outstanding natural beauty. I think it is. And it was written by Roy Hodgin, who I think you might have heard of.
Roy Hodgin.
Yes.
One and only. I was going to say Roy Hodgin.
And C.R. Ford as well, who wrote that.
Chris Ford.
Yes.
Yeah, both former Scott Wilson Kirkpatrick guys who were closely involved in the design of the Glasgow motorway system.
Mm-hmm. So they've written this paper, so I'm going to read out what they've written about the proposals for the Tummel Bridge first. So that's the bridge at the top of the dual carriageway. The requirements for the Tummel Bridge were to span the River Tummel at a width of 90 metres, to provide a slip road to Pit Lockry and a farm access on both the south side and the north side. Despite the controlled exercise by the hydro dam, flooding has been observed on the existing road and on the floodplains. It was therefore desirable to use a bridge span which would not significantly affect the flood level of the river. The bridge design chosen was no more expensive, caused less interruption of the river, and was considered to be more aesthetically pleasing.
Okay.
So that's that one. The next one was a bit more difficult.
Right.
That's the Clooney Bridge over Loch Vascali, which was created by the Pit Lockry Dam. Clooney Bridge required very special consideration. It was a place of particular beauty and a focus of the footpath system. It also posed considerable engineering problems. Unlike many underbridges, Clooney would in consequence be subject to close inspection from pedestrians. 3 possible solutions emerged. A span arrangement of 40-70-40 metres, with concrete piers in the loch and haunched beams as for Tummel Bridge, a steel arch, or a splay leg portal with the footings out of the water, giving a deck span of 40-70-40, but an actual clear span of 90 metres at founding level. So that's what we have now, is the bridge with the piers that sort of launch into the middle from the bank, kind of like if you're on the Hamilton Bypass and you've got those farm bridges. You've got the beams that launch and hold it up, so it's kind of like that.
Raked supports.
Yes,
That's
them there. So this was the bypass was designed by Jameson Mackay and Partners, and it was built by Balfour Beatty. This was opened in stages. So stage 1 was from Ballinewig to the Clooney Bridge to the Pit Lockry Junction, and it was opened by Lord Mansfield on the 19th of May 1981. And Stage 2, which went from the Clooney Bridge to the bottom of Killiecrankie, opened in September 1981, and this won the Saltire Award for Civil Engineering in 1981. And there's a plaque under the bridge there.
Yeah. The Killiecrankie is a very interesting section.
Yes.
And had its own challenges as well.
Certainly.
And many people may not actually be aware that there's a very large structure there.
There is a very, very large structure. There is a 650 metre long viaduct that goes over Killiecrankie.
That's when you're on the dual carriageway
That's
section.
the short dual carriageway section.
The short dual carriageway, and you don't realise, but you're actually on a kind of a stilt structure there, aren't you? It's a viaduct.
Kind of
coming out of the hillside,
This is very impressive. This was deliberately left to last because of how difficult it'd be, because the Scottish Development Department said, right, well, this is the most difficult bit, so get the rest done, and then we'll see what we can do here. They did think about maybe having a tunnel on the west side of Killiecrankie Pass, which is a steep-sided valley.
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah. Because if you look at Killiecrankie, it is very, very constrained, because you've got everything kind of converges, goes through the pass and separates out again.
Yeah.
So they obviously knew this would be quite difficult. So then they realised, okay, we're going to have to go above the existing A9, which is now the B801, B8079, something like that.
That's right,
So it's elevated above that on a large viaduct and retaining wall structure. This is a very impressive piece of engineering.
It is. You can really get an impression from it seen from below. I know that you have some great pictures from your drone of this.
I picked up a drone for tuppence. So
it's perfect for Killiecrankie inspections.
It is very, very impressive. It's hidden away by the trees, so you can't really see it too much, but it is this very impressive structure.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So we've got a wee extract from an article about it.
Okay.
For some more information. Each carriageway is carried on a separate structure. One viaduct, 285 metres long, was required for the southbound carriageway, and one 615 long for the northbound carriageway. The viaducts consists of a series of 15-metre spans using inverted T pre-stressed beams with inset concrete infill and joined over the supports with a reinforced concrete lost crosshead to provide continuity under live load. So if you're into structures, you will know all about that more than I will.
Music to Stuart's ears, he's bobbing away there. You know, it's just like being at work, isn't it?
The retaining walls are of mass concrete. Now, there's sort of three retaining walls. There's one above the whole thing. There's one that holds up the southbound carriageway after the viaduct, and there's one that holds up the whole thing at the bottom. The retaining walls of mass concrete. In order to reduce the bulk of the walls, it was decided to provide stability by anchoring the bases down to the rock by means of rock anchors and the post stressed the stems. The front faces are battered at 12-in-1, and the uphill and downhill walls are clad with buff grey-coloured concrete spill block, reconstructed stone to reduce the visual impact of the large areas of walls in this sensitive area.
Fantastic, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this was the last section to open between Perth and Inverness, and it was opened on the 19th of August 1986 by Michael Ancram, who opened M74 at Lesmahigo.
He was at the Scottish office.
If you watch the video, he mentions that he opened the new A9.
Yeah. That's going to go down as one of our greatest podcast moments there. You're describing the technical makeup of this fantastic structure.
So there is a small lay-by next to the bottom of it, so if you're in the area, go and give it a look, because it is very impressive.
I think I'm going to have to, at some point, actually go up there and see it in the flesh. I've driven over it a few times, but I've
You don't get an appreciation of it when you're driving on it.
Been overtaking stuff, that's why.
That's what, you're more interested in trying to get to the end and overtake that lorry before the end.
This was designed...
It's true.
Oh,
it's
dear.
true.
Anyway, PC Nick is not listening.
This was designed by Sir Alexander Gibb and Partners, and it was built by Tarmac Civil Engineering.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that's that. So north of the viaduct, the A9 bypasses Blair Athol, crossing the Killiecrankie battlefield immediately north of the viaduct. So the long straight section goes through the battlefield, which is raising some controversy now with the duelling.
We can segue quickly into talking about the duelling, because I know there are some issues here, and they're doing the A9 guys are doing their best to try and mitigate the impact of the road going through a battlefield. But here's the thing: they built the original road there, so that the road's already there. So what's an extra carriageway really going to be?
I think it is the footprint that this new dual carriageway will take up.
Right.
And I think the impact at the time, before everything sort of grows back and shields it, I think will be...
Right.
Plus, there's a lot of archaeological work that still hasn't really been done yet.
That's just what I was going to say. I mean, a lot of people take that as a good excuse to do the archaeological digs that wouldn't be done otherwise, because there isn't money or it's not high priority. Actually putting the road near there or through there might give them an opportunity to do a proper
We
dig.
had the same thing with the M74 when it was widened between Junction 6 and
That's right.
Junction 4. So there's things that can be discovered. Maybe this is a great thing.
Yeah.
You know?
All right. Okay.
Okay, so north of there we've got the bypass of... Oh dear, I've lost all my notes. Bear with me while I shuffle my
Duncan,
papers.
I get
shuffle
this
the
problem when
papers.
Stuart makes me talk about some road that he's asked me to research in half a week. And
Half a week. Don't listen to his excuses. He always gets minimum month's notice, people.
Yeah, okay. All right.
So the bypass of Blair Athol was opened in November 1983. This was again Alexander Gibb and it was built by Tarmac.
Okay.
So this joins in to the next section at the House of Brewer, just north of there, a place called Calvin.
I like House of Brewer.
Have you been to the House of Brewer, John?
I'm going to be honest.
Buy some tweed jackets, cashmere.
I haven't. It's all
£50
very.
for a sandwich.
I was going to say it's all very. It's like the tea bay of the
It
north.
is, yeah.
Is how I think of it. But no, I do intend on going in there over the weekend. So
It is
I'm going up.
It is a tourist trap. It is very busy a lot of the time when I'm there.
Right.
It does pick up quite a lot.
I mean, it's good for an emergency pee. You know,
Yes.
if you need to go in there for that reason.
There's
but-
202 lay-bys, John, as well on the A9. So
Can
that's
I-
the thing to chuck
can
in.
I-
All the lay-bys between Perth and Inverness, apart from the new ones, are all numbered.
That's one of my questions. Is
Yes.
Why is that? Why have they got numbered lay-bys? Because
I
I
think
haven't
it's-
seen any other road that numbers its lay-bys.
Do they have telephones?
No,
Yes.
they have a phone number
Right.
that you call.
Okay.
But other than that, you're on your own.
So I'd imagine it's for identification purposes.
It's pretty much to
if
say,
you're
I'm
in
on the
distress,
A9, it's a bend. I'm not too sure.
and
what
I'm
it is.
in lay-by 106.
Aye,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
So it's there. So we've then got the challenging section, the highest section of trunk road in the UK, the Dramatar Pass.
Oh yes.
So we all set for the Dramatar Pass. This was done in about 3 bits between Calvin, the House of Brewer, and Crubin Moor.
Okay.
That's what I consider the end of the Dramatar Pass.
So this has got quite a few. This has got 2 sections of dual carriageway if you include Crubin Moor in it.
Yes.
Okay.
The first section was designed by Freeman Fox and Partners.
So that's the people who done Forthright Bridge
Yep.
and Erskine.
Yes.
Now the section that they designed went from Calvin up to where it becomes Highland Regional Council, because this section is in Tayside in Perth and Kinross. So that was the longest section to be built at once, and it was 21 kilometres long. This featured very deep cuttings and excavations to get it up to where the dual carriageway is. And it also includes the split level dual carriageway, the racetrack.
Which I know Mr. Hassel has a question about.
Yes.
That split section dual carriageway.
Well, Duncan might cover this, but why is it split
Why
section?
is it split? I think it's due to the fact that the land is falling down. Well, it's not falling down,
Right.
but it's on a slope down
Okay.
to where the river is. And I think keeping them both together would have required either a big embankment for one
Yes.
or really deep excavation for the other.
Now that you say it like that, I'm thinking of that. If I was building that, if you have it as 2 separate carriageways, you don't need to have it built out so much.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
So the northbound carriageway follows the original road alignment.
Right.
So it's pretty much on top of it. And southbound kind of follows the military road. Kind of.
Right. Do you know, Duncan? I mean, you use the road a lot. I always found a thing with that where I was driving down it, and because you can't even see the other carriageway at times, and you're overtaking things, you start to kind of second guess yourself. You go, am I still on the dual carriageway?
Yeah.
There's not going to be something that's going to emerge the other way. There's something quite unnerving about it. You know?
Yeah, I agree.
found,
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little shout out here to Richard Ward, who was site manager with Freeman Fox. So hello to Richard.
Okay.
And muck shifter John Atkinson.
Okay.
A very good guy who was involved in a lot of road schemes, and he shifted muck from everywhere. So
Okay.
hello to John. How are you doing?
Love it when you get a
Yeah.
contractor that tells you stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we've hit the boundary. Oh wait, there's a wee thing I want to chuck in.
Okay.
This opened in December of 1979. This one section. I think it opened in sort of bits because it's online and offline.
Right.
It was let at 12 million. And it came in at 28 million.
Oh God.
Yeah, and this was considered a financial disaster by the Scottish Development Department.
Yeah. Understandably so.
So
Yeah.
where does this whole section run from again? So this is from the south.
This is from Calvin,
Calvin.
the House of Brewer,
The House
just
of Brewer.
north of the House of Brewer, up to where the summit is, just north of where the
Right, so
the
that's
boundary
a single
is.
carriageway section at Dalwhinnie.
Yes,
Yeah.
just south of there, just a couple of miles. There was a wee section between there and Dalwhinnie.
Yeah.
That was the Dramatar Lodge to the county boundary section.
Right.
And this was now designed by the Highland Regional Council and built by Shanks and McEwen.
Yeah.
And this opened in September of 1982.
Okay.
If you look out for the bigger lay-bys at the side of the road there, they're what's left of the old road.
Ah, okay.
Oh, right. So they utilised bits of that. Interesting. Interesting.
We shout out here to Ian Larkman, David Spence, Philip Shimon, and David Anderson, who were involved with the Highland Regional Council bits.
Okay.
That I've all met are all fantastic guys who
Yeah.
have got a wealth of knowledge.
Okay.
So you need more than one cup of coffee to talk with them, but they are fantastic. So thank you to the information they've given me.
Okay.
Great.
So we're getting to that kind of busy section now then between Dalwhinnie and
Busy, Stuart.
Kintraig
Busy,
and
Stuart.
Aviemore. Well, busy.
But it's one of the quieter sections, the Dramatar Pass. It drops to about 8,000 vehicles a day.
Is this not where you get a lot of convoying though? Where
Yeah,
You can, yes, but
what I think, Stuart means is this section just north of Dramatar. As you start to get nearer and nearer Aviemore,
yeah.
and between Crubin Moor and Dramatar and the dual carriageway there, it's a long period
Yeah.
without dual carriageway,
Yeah.
and it's horrendous.
That's
can
the
be
bit
quite
that
a
maybe
long
sticks
section,
out to
yeah.
me. Yeah. So it's low traffic flow, but because of
But
the
convoys.
long section.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But because of the nature of the road, it is in a big sort of heather valley. The sightlines are fantastic. They are way beyond 450 metres.
I
for
was going to say,
overtaking.
Duncan, heading south, there's a section there before you get to the duels where it's a very, very long, you can see for kilometres, and
Yes.
it's a single carriageway, and the bend goes off to the right. I pulled off a record overtake there, and I must have overtaken over a dozen vehicles at once. and honestly, it was because they were all in a convoy like that.
Yeah.
And you can, do it. So there we go.
A wee fact to chuck in here. Some of the surfacing on the Dalwhinnie bypass, we're going to talk about Dalwhinnie in a second,
Okay.
is the original surfacing.
Well, to
And
this
it's, and
day.
it's been there since 1976.
Oh, well,
it's still
fantastic. Good old
This was
hot rod asphalt doing
this
its
is a wee
job.
bit of sort of surfacing history. The A9 is sort of lean mix, and it's was it dense bitumen macadam flexible
Yeah.
stuff.
Uh-huh.
So lean mix is concrete, and a lot of that broke up and failed, so they had to replace that, or it's still there, but it's horrendous.
Okay.
So a lot of the
Interesting.
Dalwhinnie stuff is still quite is original.
Okay.
Right,
that's
I
kind of
see.
So Dalwhinnie Bypass, to quickly talk about that, was designed by Highland Regional Council, and it was built by Tractor Shovels.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
This opened on the 26th of June 1976.
Okay.
So that's
Interesting.
that very long section that goes past the distillery.
Fairly nondescript section
It's
of road,
a
really.
fairly
Yeah.
straightforward. Yeah.
Mhm.
There is an aqueduct that it goes over.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
There's a farm that it goes past.
Wow.
I know.
Okay.
Not a farm.
Yeah.
Surely, yeah.
And there's
okay.
the section of dual carriageway at Crubin Moor.
Yeah.
So, Duncan, can you just answer something for Crubin Moor dual carriageway? I remember for years was a very short section,
Yes.
but they did extend this in what was 2011.
2011.
That's it.
It was that short
It's
because of
over-doubled.
the sightline requirements, the curve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you look up to where that dual carriageway is, there's this massive rock excavation that they had to do to get it round there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was much easier to dual that.
Was this the section that was originally going to be 2+1 and was then changed
That's
to dual?
Kintraig.
That
Is
was
that way?
slightly further north.
All right.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's where Crubin Moor is. So the next section is a long section that goes from Crubin Moor to the top of King Usi. And this was Alexander Gibb and Partners, and this was built by Fairclough Civil
Okay.
Engineering.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
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 So this was opened on the 10th of December 1979, and this involved the 7-span structure that goes over the River Spey.
Okay.
This nature area, the Spey, and it also goes past Ruthven Barracks,
Okay.
which is lit up at night and it looks very pretty.
Okay. Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to go up there at night then, Stuart.
Yeah.
Okay. So where are we now?
So north of there, we've got King Usi to Aviemore. Now this is quite a long section. This was held up by a public inquiry because
Okay.
there is a lot of private land, and there was a Colonel Scammon, who was not too keen on the road going through his land,
Okay.
and this kind of encouraged everyone else to hold up the construction of the road.
Right.
So this didn't open until September 1982.
Okay.
Again, this was Highland Regional Council, and it was built by William Tawes.
Right.
Yes,
Okay.
that's it.
Just about every major contractor on the go at the time was involved in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you got to get work.
This section was all single carriageway, but now we have
Yes.
this new.
We have a big new section of
We have a
dual
big new
carriageway.
section of dueling
Yeah.
in there, and that's where Stuart was saying earlier. Kintraig to Dalradi. Is that? Am I correct in calling it that?
King Creed did already, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm educating the expert here, but you can tell me if I'm wrong. But that was the section they thought was going to be 2+1.
I think in early proposals they were putting in these 2+1 sections.
Yeah,
But
that's
then
right.
in 2008, I think they said, okay, let's just dual
Dual the whole lot.
dual
So they
that
converted
section.
it to both.
Yeah.
To
And
dual.
this was the easiest section to dual because
Yeah.
there was very little in the way. There was a couple of culverts,
Mhm.
but we can easily fix culverts. So
Yeah.
that opened, the new section opened on the 30th of September 2017. and it was built by Willis Bros and John Paul joint venture.
Ah,
Okay,
So that's
brilliant.
that
Yeah.
section.
Mhm.
yeah.
All right. So north of there, then, where are we now?
North of there, we've got the bypass of Aviemore,
Yeah.
and this was done by Highland Regional Council and built by Tarmac. This opened on the 20th of August 1980, so
Okay.
that turned 40 not too long ago.
Yeah.
This section, the section through the Spey Valley, if you look at the Spey Valley, you've got the A9 on one side. On the other side, you have the B970, slightly further south than Aviemore, which goes from Aviemore to about Newtonmore. No, Newton, yeah, Newtonmore. They were originally in the preliminary studies thinking of why don't we put the A9 on that side of the valley and properly just have a brand new road, get rid of all the obstructions of the existing road. That was one of the discussions of the public inquiry, but I don't think much of that because it would be too far from Aviemore.
Yeah.
You'd have to build a road to Aviemore, so I think it was much better to have it next to the existing road.
Yeah.
So north of Aviemore, we've got a more challenging section called Avilochen to Slocht.
Sloch.
Slocht.
Love
And this
that.
was designed by W.A. Fairhurst and built by Tarmac. And this opened in June of 1979.
Okay.
Do you remember Bob Pritchard, John?
Yes, I do remember.
He was involved in this. And he gave me some insight into
I'm glad Bob was
some
able
of the
to
bits and pieces.
help you as much as he's
Yeah.
helped me. Good.
Yeah, so he's given me a wee bit of detail. This is a bit about the geometry and things. So
Okay.
the geometric design was definitely predicted on fitting the new road into the landscape and frequently required the adoption of a flowing alignment on long, large radius horizontal curves with the vertical alignment in synchronization, reflecting as closely as possible the natural topography in recognition of the terrain and for the valued landscapes which the A9 passes through. However, the requirement for the overtaking sightlines on a single carriageway road meant that the wide verges were frequently necessary on the inside of some bends where the radius was small, and this resulted in some places with an apparent over-provision of verge width. So that's these big curves, and you've got all this grass and flat area in the middle,
Which
which is
helps
basically
with the
useless.
sightline. Yeah.
Yeah. This is a section with our two major structures. We've got the bridge over the River Dalmain, and we've got the section over the Schlocht Gorge.
Is
And
that
it
the
goes-
bit where it crosses the railway and the
The
road?
railway and the road. If you watch the video, which we mentioned earlier, it has a wee bit of the construction of this.
Yeah, it's impressive.
We've got a wee bit more from Bob.
Okay.
The very restricted locations available for intermediate supports of the Sloch Bridge largely dictated the adoption of 3 spans. The bridge deck comprises of 4 plate girders with a composite reinforced concrete deck. Because of the lack of space anywhere in the valley for any sizable craneage, the girders were erected by launching them in braced pairs of unequal length from the south and north abutments, with counterbalancing weights and other precautions for stability. So that is a very impressive structure.
I know, it sounds like
When I
Bob's
was
words there, yeah.
when I was younger, we would always drive under it, and it'd always be very, very impressive seeing the A9 high above.
I never got an appreciation for this, and I think it wasn't until someone like yourself, Duncan, was putting a lot of these things on Facebook and these pictures, and I thought, wow, look at that. So, no, that's
Yeah, it's a lot of hidden gems,
hidden
on the
gems.
A9.
I found this section very quiet on the A9.
It does
Soft
flow
section.
fairly well. Going
And-
north, I think it does not too bad.
Very, very quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That's the bit also that goes past the German helmet, the German soldier, the face in the rocks. You're
oh
looking
yes,
at. Have you heard of this?
I've seen that. Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
haven't.
Have you said, "Oh dear, John, you've not been
No,
paying
no, no.
attention"?
But the thing is, I do not use the A9 between Aviemore and Inverness because I turned off at Aviemore. I used to stay in Elgin.
Oh, John, you're missing out. There's
We're
bridges
missing-
up north. There's all these exciting structures.
This is the mysterious bit of the A9
Yeah.
for me, so I've got my ears pricked up here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the next section is from Schlocht to Dalmagari Farm, and this opened on the 17th of November 1976. Again, this was designed by W.A. Fairhurst, and it was built this time by Watlings.
Okay.
The reason for this is there's a large viaduct in the middle
Okay.
called the Tomatin Viaduct or the Findhorn Viaduct. Findhorn, I think, is the railway one.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
think it's one of the either. This features a large 5-span viaduct. Shout out to Ken Cantley, who was involved in the construction of the viaduct with Watlings, and he gave me a wee bit of insight into the design of it. So
Is that weathering steel?
that is a weathering steel bridge, John.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That was the second weathering steel bridge to be built in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Stuart, where was the first weathering steel bridge?
You got him on the hop. I love it.
We were discussing this not too long ago.
There are so many.
What was the first one?
The first one.
I used to think it was between Claylands and Hermiston.
No,
I'll give you it's M80 or
Oh, Seabegs.
Castlecary.
Seabegs. Seabegs Road.
Castlecary Arches, just north of the Castlecary
Yeah.
Arches, a funny
Yes.
looking chunky thing, and that's a weathering steel bridge.
It is, but it's different. It's different to this.
Yes.
That we're looking at. You're right. It's a hollow box,
It's a big
weathered
hollow
steel
box,
box, but these are beams.
These are
girders. So
aye.
there's a difference. But
Yeah.
you're right. Seabegs was the first 1972, replacing the one that collapsed. It had been built 10 years before.
I thought we were going to have our
Yeah.
first Glasgow Motorway Archive podcast brawl there, but that was narrowly avoided.
Discussion. John.
Excellent.
So, some facts about the Fintron Viaduct. The viaduct was built with weathering steel, which is a US steel which develops a skin to stop corrosion. So it's not painted.
It just looks rusted,
it just
but
looks
it's meant
rusty,
to be.
but it's developed a skin to protect itself.
Yeah.
Basically.
Right.
It was one of the first viaducts to be built with weather-resistant steel. It is constructed with reinforced concrete piers sitting on piled foundations with reinforced crossheads supporting steel-plated girders 1.5 metres deep.
Yeah.
The deck is made up of 8 steel-plated girders with reinforced concrete deck and connecting pins to join them up.
Yeah.
The deck is waterproof with 2 coats of 40mm dense bitumen macadam topped with hot-rolled asphalt.
There we go.
Wonderful.
So
that's
it's a fairly
it.
bog standard structure, actually. And looking at it, it's nothing fancy.
But at the time, that was
Yeah.
pretty
Kind of-
new.
kind of
was,
the way we were
yeah.
going, yeah. Mhm.
with the weathering steel. So
If you look at in comparison to the old bridge,
Mhm.
it's much more, so I would say more engineered. The old bridge is a big concrete beast.
Yeah.
thing.
Okay, we're well on the way to Inverness now.
We're nearly at Inverness.
Get us there.
One wee scheme left. We've got Dalmagary to Bogbane, and this opened in April 1979, and this was again designed by W.A. Fairhurst, and it was built by William Tawes. This involved a new route around the Mealmore Hill, roughly following the Military Road, and a new bridge over the River Nairn, again with weathering steel bridges.
Okay.
Okay.
So that's us now at the top of Inverness at Bogbane.
Right. Okay.
So from here to Ardully was called in plans and proposals as the Bewley and Chromatic Firths diversions.
Okay.
The bypass diversion, things like that.
Yeah.
This was envisaged way back from the 60s, as early as that. Where's my history?
Just
Talk amongst yourselves. for a
No,
moment.
no, I'm just looking. I remember this when you're coming into Inverness, and I know we're going up. There's this big, long,
Straight.
I don't know
section.
if it's straight, but it's very downhill.
Yeah.
And you get this
it's jewelled as well.
Yeah, and you get this lovely vista of
Yeah.
the city. You're like, wow, it's great.
Likewise, when you're leaving the city and you're going south, you get this long climb
Yes,
on the
you
dual
do.
carriageway.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's good that there's dual carriageway there because I'd imagine it's slow for heavy goods vehicles
Yeah.
going up the hill.
It was originally proposed in the plans as single carriageway
Oh,
up to
right.
Bogbane, but I think this was very well changed.
Where is Bogbane exactly?
Bogbane is just pretty much where the hill flattens out. So it's
okay.
a small sort of farm, touristy place just next to it.
Okay.
So we're now talking about Kessick and Chromatic Bridges. So these were 2 major projects that were envisaged as far back as 1963 in a booklet called The Crossing of the Three Firths. This was a public booklet produced to say, well, why don't we build a new road across the Black Isle and improve? And
Because it was quite a long diversion through places like Dingwall and stuff like
yes,
that prior to
it
that.
was. It
wasn't
was a very
Yeah.
long loop round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they thought, let's build a wee bit more of a direct route. And so the Scottish Development Department commissioned Crouch and Hogg, who were responsible for this section across the Black Isle, to look at maybe proposals for a bridge, a new road, something like that. So they came back with some options. Option 1 was improving the existing A9 by dualling it round via Bewley, Muirvord and Dingwall, or building a low-level bridge over the Bewley Firth and then climbing up. Or, which is the option they went with, building a high-level bridge over the Kessick Narrows and then constructing a new road over there. And it was cheaper and it was way more of a benefit to construct the Bewley Firth Bridge, which later became known as Kessick Bridge. The dual carriageway would end at the Tor Roundabout and we would continue along to the Cromarty Causeway, not bridge yet, Causeway, and link up with the existing A9 towards Invergordon, which is where the oil was. So we've nearly made it to the oil.
And this section was all jewelled.
The section was all dual.
And
It's dual as far as Tor.
It's
My
Tor
dad
Roundabout.
always told me Tor Roundabout is the most northerly section of dual carriageway in the UK.
When they dual the A96 at Elgin, that will be further north. Fun fact.
Technically, yeah.
Slightly
yeah,
further north, yeah.
I never thought of that.
But it's really the A9.
And we should have pointed out that there's the Raigmore Junction on that section
Yes,
dueling at
that was
Inverness.
part of the approaches. That was opened in the 12th of November 1977, and it was built by Fairclough and again done by Crouch and Hogg.
So that was the Kessick South approaches.
The south approaches,
So
yeah.
Longman Roundabout and
The embankment up to where the bridge would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No Cali Stadium yet.
Okay.
Oh, right. So
Yeah.
Longman came later.
Yes.
And then
Okay.
the bridge came along 1982.
Bridge came along 1982, yes.
Okay, so that basically takes us as far as Inverness.
Yeah.
So let's have a brief consideration of the dualling then. So they're dualling the entire stretch between Perth and Inverness. Now, we've said already in part 1 and we've said it again in part 2.
Mm-hmm.
The main issue with the road, the A9 was designed to modern standards,
Yes.
with good long sweeping curves and good sight lines. The A9 is not being dualled because it is a substandard road.
No,
The
far
A9
from it.
is being
far from
dualled
it.
due to driver behaviour.
Driver behaviour and
Safety.
the accidents.
And its adverse safety record is almost entirely down to driver behaviour.
Yeah.
And
So
it's-
the A9 again is not dangerous.
No.
Drivers are dangerous.
And it's primarily to do with frustration.
An unsafe
Yeah.
overtaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unsafe overtaking as a result of being stuck in convoys of slow moving, heavy goods vehicles,
Yeah.
of which there are probably a good few hundred a day,
There are quite a lot, yes.
probably in the
I think
thousands
around about
potentially.
13% or so a day
Yeah,
is
I-
heavy goods.
I
Okay.
remember the horrendous time the Tesco lorries were all on that
Yeah.
doing 40. Now, they moved
Yeah.
a lot of it to rail.
Yes,
Yeah.
They did. Now, Duncan, there has been a trial for a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit
there has, yes.
for a single carriageway. How has that worked out? So this is the 50-mile-an-hour for HGVs
Yeah, so
that normally have to
all-
do 40.
Heavy goods vehicles at 7.5 tons had to do 40.
Yes.
And they were campaigning again for years, since the sort of late 80s, early 90s. Why don't we put this up to 50? Because
Yeah.
we've got this good single carriageway.
Yeah.
So they were quite hesitant about that. But then with the accidents and the car drivers and all the sort of things come together and said, okay, we'll put the speed limit up for HGVs to
Yeah.
sort of discourage the overtaking, make
Yeah.
convoys go quicker, and we'll also put the speed cameras in to control the cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was found that a third of the cars travelling on the A9 were travelling above 60, 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, easily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough given its alignment, but you know, you've got to consider other road users
It
as
was
well.
always
Yeah.
the closing speeds which were the problem.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the thing about the A9. In terms of slight accidents, it's actually quite low in terms of the stats compared to other roads. However, in terms of fatal accidents,
Very high.
it's fairly high.
Yeah.
Well,
So the average speed cameras are in place there as well. From
On the single carriageway section.
on the single carriageway
Yeah.
sections, and they are 60 mile an hour.
They're 60 mile an hour, yes.
that includes your overtaking lanes. Don't get caught with that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
and that's had the benefit of vastly reducing the accident
Accidents.
rate
Yeah,
and the fatality rate on there, noticeably so.
certainly, yes.
You know, so I don't think anybody would deny that has been a major improvement there.
I find it's made it quite stressful for me to drive it because I don't have cruise control in the car.
Yeah.
So I do find I need to keep an eye on my speedo really, really quite carefully. And then if you are overtaking, you need to be careful you don't exceed the limit
Yeah.
while doing so. So
They are average speed. So if you do
Yes.
61 and a 60, you're not going to get a ticket. It's calculated over
over
a
the
long
distance.
distance.
A lot
yeah.
of people don't realise that. I see people
so
braking at the cameras.
At the cameras, yeah, that's quite frustrating.
Yeah. Okay. So before we do a very brief coverage of the northern section, what's your feelings, Duncan, on that section between Perth and Inverness? Obviously, a very well-known, huge engineering project in
Yeah.
the 70s and 80s. Very well regarded, vastly improved the road as a whole. You obviously have enjoyed very much looking into the
Yes,
history of it.
certainly.
So what's your general feelings on it?
It is a underrated piece of engineering, in my opinion. It is something that has been sort of taken over by headlines and things like that, saying it's the most dangerous road
Yeah.
in the whole universe. And
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
well, no, it's not. And there are some, as we've said, fantastic gems on it, like Killycranky and the Slocht area and all these. It can be sometimes a really nice drive if the road's quiet and you've got a good driving speed. So it's very impressive.
I agree. It's become notorious for all the wrong reasons, and you
Yeah.
know, when it actually should be notorious for actually, in some ways, how great the engineering is. And I've learnt a lot.
Okay, so hopefully then in the years ahead, the rest of the dueling projects will come along.
Yeah.
There's one on site at the moment. There'll be several more coming down the line, and we can have a follow-up podcast when they're all complete and discuss the improvements to the overall route and the driver
If
experience.
we're all still here.
If
yeah.
we're all about,
If-
yes, hopefully.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. So that's good to know. Right, well, we're kind of pushed for time, so we're going to have a very brief discussion about the sections north of Kessick. So we've spoken about the Kessick Bridge. Great.
Yeah.
There's two other major crossings
Yes.
that have come along, and really, to my knowledge, they're the only real improvements that have happened to the A9 north of Inverness, aren't they?
There's
That and
been
the Braes.
several, but these are sort of the major ones.
Yeah.
There's been the Chromatic Bridge, which is a 68 span sort of bridge structure.
Yeah.
It was originally a causeway,
Yeah.
Right.
but because the Chromatic for the tidal, it would ruin the marsh and
yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. So they said, okay, we'll build a 68 span bridge.
Yeah.
And then we've got some improvements north of there taking us up to Dornock.
Yeah.
Right.
Dornock is the 890 metres long,
Yeah.
and it was built with cast and push, which is basically launching the bridge from the south to the north.
So who designed each of these bridges and constructed them?
Crouch and Hog did the Chromatic Bridge. Dornock Bridge was, I think, a bit of a joint venture. Dornock Bridge was Crouch and Hog, but it was built by Christian Sani and Nelson Morrison, Sir Alexander Gibb, and Tony G. and partners.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it was a big
everybody involved in
collection,
that.
yeah.
And what's the opening dates for each of those?
So the Chromatic Bridge opened in the 12th of April 1979, and it was built by Fairclough. And Dornock Bridge was opened on the 27th of August 1991, and was opened by the Queen Mother.
That was 1991. So that,
1991.
right.
It took a little bit of time,
That's
quite a
but
bit
there
later.
were
That's later
other
than I thought.
other sections approaching Dornock Bridge that took a little bit longer.
Right.
Right.
There was a bit of political sort of interference and things like
So
that.
was that
they-
basically straightening out the original
that
road?
was straightening it out?
Right.
Yeah, bypass.
Taking away bends
Yeah.
and things like that. Okay.
Yeah. What about these hairpin bends that have recently been sorted?
Yes, well, if you go north of Dornock, the road has not been upgraded to the 60-mile-an-hour road, so there are a couple of dodgy sections.
Right.
The notorious one was Berridale Braes,
Right.
which was a steep 13% down over a bridge, and then steep up, round a hairpin, and back up again.
An actual hairpin, like
An actual
rally stage
hairpin 180-degree turn. Now, this became notorious not really for accidents, although it did have incidents on it, but was for trucks
runaway
turning
trucks.
around. Yeah. So they have recently, very recently, straightened it out by making the curve much longer,
Yeah.
keeping the gradient, but it is much better. I drove on it not too long ago, and it is fantastic.
Yeah. How far north of Inverness is Berridale Braes roughly?
About 60, 70 miles.
Right. So it's a fair distance north. I mean,
It
You
is,
can't
yeah.
just nip up there.
No.
Yeah, I know this is a problem.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
took a bit of time.
That will probably have a major improvement.
Oh,
up
certainly, yeah.
there. Yeah. So from there, really, the A9 just continues and it stops at Thurso. Is that right?
It goes through Thurso and stops at Scrabster Harbour, which is about a mile north of it, at
Yeah.
a mini roundabout at the harbour.
Okay. And originally continued as far as John O'Groats.
As far as John O'Groats, yes, but it was trunked to Thurso.
Yeah.
So it was the A8 something or other that went to Thurso, and then in 1996,
Yeah.
they moved it.
Part
to-
of the trunk road
yeah.
reviews. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, listen, there's been so much to take in, Duncan. It's been
It has.
absolutely fascinating.
It's huge. It could easily be a part 3 on
Yeah,
this.
I think we're
Yeah.
definitely going to have a follow-up on this. I think we'll have you back next year. And we'll
Excellent.
have an update. We'll discuss your updated research and anything else you've learned. We'll talk about the process of the dueling by that stage as well,
Exactly.
see where we are.
Because we haven't really scratched that. So, yeah.
There's a lot going on in the A9, so I think we'll make this a regular thing. We'll have you back now and
Excellent.
again, and even to discuss some other issues as well. So thanks very much again for that. If anybody has any questions about the A9 following these podcasts, please send them to us. We'll get Duncan to answer them for you. There's no doubt a lot there. And crucially, if you're out there and you have any information on the A9 that you would like to share with us and Duncan, please let us know. Send it in to us.
Maybe you've worked on the scheme and
It would
You've
be
got
really-
pictures or booklets, anything like that.
Exactly. It would be really good to hear
Excellent.
from you. So Duncan, thank you very much for the long journey to
Nope,
come and
thank you for having me.
record both of these parts. We
Happy
really
to
appreciate
do the
that.
A9 again.
Yes,
Yes.
definitely. We'll
Good.
have you back. In the meantime, thanks very much for listening to the Glasgow Motorway Archive podcast. As we always say, all of our episodes can be found in the usual places. That's Apple, Spotify, Podbean, and all other major podcast hosts.
Yeah, that's right, Stuart. And as I always say, make sure you visit Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the daily fix of Glasgow Motorway Archive media.
Yep, not enough people reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, so if you're listening to this on Apple and you like it, give us a review, even if it's just the stars. You don't need to type any text. It's a good way of getting us recognised. We hope you enjoyed the Doors Open Days event. If you listened to that on the 19th of September, it was very enjoyable, very strange doing it online for a change rather than in the flesh. But hopefully next year we'll be back to normal. And if there's any more events coming up, we'll be sure to let you know. Keep an eye open for our calendar for 2021 that will be appearing very soon, and we will also be revealing our new website in the coming month or two as well.
Yeah, the fun never
Stay tuned
stops.
for that. There's plenty on the go. So thanks very much, and we will see you very soon.
Okay, bye-bye.